Well, we're continuing our sermon series on the life of Joseph this morning. In fact, this is part 4 of the 4-part series, so we'll be wrapping everything up today. And today we want to talk about becoming the blessing. And the story is really about how Joseph becomes a blessing to many, many other people. And it's been my experience that usually when God blesses people, he uses other people to bless them. Now, God can bless us any way that he wants. When the Israelites were wandering in the desert, he had manna and quail appear mysteriously out of the sky every day, and he can do it like that if he wants. But again, my experience is usually that God uses people to bless other people, and that's what happens in the life of Joseph. So we're going to be reading from Genesis chapters 42 to 47. I'm not going to read all of that. That's a long section. I'm going to read parts of that as we finish our story today. Let me review though before we move on, in case you're new here today or you missed a few weeks, or just to kind of brush up our memories here. Starts out with Abraham. And Abraham was the father of the Jewish faith. God counted him as righteous. And so God said, I'm going to bless all peoples of the world through you. Through you, I'm going to bless all peoples. And he also said, you're going to be a blessing to the nation of Israel. So it starts out with Abraham. Abraham has more than one child, but it's Isaac who the blessing is passed through. And then from Isaac, it goes to Jacob, who was renamed Israel. And Jacob has 12 sons. He also has a daughter. But 12 sons make up basically, not totally, but that's about how we get the 12 tribes of Israel. And one of Jacob's sons was Joseph. So that's how we get to the story of Joseph. So to review Joseph's story, Joseph was his dad's favorite. His dad was married to 4 women. 2 of those were his actual wives, and 2 of them were his servants. And that was permissible back then. And the 2 women that he was legally married to were Rachel and Leah. Leah he didn't love and had a lot of children by. Rachel he did love, and Rachel couldn't have any children. But in Rachel's old age, she became pregnant and gave birth to Joseph. And so because Jacob loved Rachel so much, then Joseph, when he was born, became Jacob's very favorite because Rachel was his favorite wife. So we start out with Joseph. Joseph's brothers were so jealous they sold him to slave traders who took him to Egypt. Joseph made a lot of mistakes, and one of the things he told his brothers were someday he had a dream given to him by God, and he said to his older brothers, who were much older, someday you're going to bow down to me. Well, that didn't go over real well. And his dad also made him a special coat that nobody else had. So his brothers were jealous, and they got fed up with him. They were going to kill him. They said, let's not kill him. We're just going to sell him to slave traders passing through. So Joseph is taken to Egypt, and they lie to his father and say he was killed by an animal. So they lied to his father about getting rid of Joseph. So Joseph is enslaved in Egypt, but he rises there, and he becomes the right-hand man to Potiphar. Potiphar is an Egyptian official. He has Joseph as his slave. And he's so good, Potiphar puts him second in command in his household, and his household prospers, because we find out Joseph has the gift of administration. Well, Joseph refuses the advances of Potiphar's wife, who falsely accuses him of attempted rape, so he's in prison. Joseph's now in prison, and he's wrongly in prison. Didn't deserve it at all. Didn't deserve to be sold into slavery. Didn't deserve to be in prison. But while he's in prison, he now rises to the highest ranking prisoner. The jailer recognizes these gifts of administration and uses him as prisoner. So now, I guess if you have to be in prison, be a successful prisoner, and that's what Joseph is, all right? Very successful. And then he interprets a dream for Pharaoh. Pharaoh's cupbearer happened to be in prison. Pharaoh got mad at him, we don't know why, and imprisons him. He has a dream, and Joseph says to the cupbearer, this dream means you're going to get out of prison, and you're going to be restored to your rightful place as Pharaoh's cupbearer. That's the good news. But when this happens, please remember me. Remember me, I'm in prison, put in a good word, maybe get me out of here. So that's what he says to the cupbearer. Cupbearer gets out, forgets about Joseph. 2 years pass now, 2 years. And now Pharaoh has this dream, and nobody can interpret it. But the cupbearer says, oh, you know, my goodness, there's this guy, kind of forgot about him, named Joseph. I was in prison with him for a while, and he can interpret dreams. And Pharaoh, I think if we get him out, he can probably interpret yours. So that's what happens. So Joseph correctly interprets Pharaoh's dream. And Pharaoh's dream was with fat cows and skinny cows and fat pieces of grain and skinny pieces of grain. But it basically meant this. For 7 years, there's going to be bountiful harvest in Egypt, and then 7 years of famine. So Joseph says, Pharaoh, here's what you need to do. You need to collect all the extra grain you can for these 7 years, because famine's going to come, and if you're not prepared, your people are going to starve and suffer. And because of this dream, and there's something about Pharaoh clicks, and he says, you know, I think this guy can do it. He says not only Joseph, hey, thanks for interpreting the dreams. You had this great idea. I'm going to now put you in charge, second in command in all of Egypt. You're going to be the person. So now Joseph rises to second in command in all of Egypt. And that's where we pick up the story. So now Joseph is second in command. I'm reading from Genesis 42. And all the countries came to Egypt to buy grain from Joseph because the famine was severe in the land. And that's what we talked about last week. So now everybody's coming to Egypt to buy grain. When Jacob's back home, when he heard that there was grain in Egypt, he said to his other sons, who was 11 other sons, why do you just keep looking at each other? He continued, I have heard there's grain in Egypt. Go down and buy some so we don't die. So he sends his other 11 sons, with the exception of the youngest son, Benjamin, to Egypt to buy grain. Now, Benjamin was Joseph's brother by Rachel, his favorite. So if Joseph was his favorite, and now Joseph's gone, who's going to be his dad's favorite? It's going to be Benjamin, the youngest. So now Benjamin's getting the special treatment. So he sends all his other sons, and he says, Benjamin, you stay back with me. I'm not going to send you. Then 10 of Joseph's brothers went down to buy Egypt. And again, he didn't send Benjamin. So when they come to Egypt, guess who they come before? Joseph. And I pick up the story now. Now Joseph was the governor of the land, the one who sold the grain to all the people. So when Joseph's brothers arrived, they bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. As soon as Joseph saw his brothers, he recognized them, but he pretended to be a stranger and spoke harshly to them. So here they come, and they bow down to Joseph. And in Hebrew, that word for bow down means they bow down totally like they would before a supreme God. And they groveled, and they literally took their noses and put them in the dirt. It wasn't just a little bow. I mean, they fell down before this governor of Egypt, who they did not recognize as Joseph. And Joseph doesn't say anything. And again, he's in the culture now. He's not speaking the language of the Israelites. He's speaking of the language of the Egyptians. He speaks it fluently. And he says to them in the Egyptian language, where do you come from, he asked. And he uses an interpreter, so again, they don't recognize him. From the land of Canaan, they replied, to buy food. And we're told this, although Joseph recognized his brothers, they did not recognize him. Now, there's several reasons why they don't recognize him. One of them, it's been 20 years. Okay? That's one reason. But you know what? I still recognize people in my high school reunion after 20 years. I haven't changed a bit. A lot of them have changed a lot, but not me, and they recognize me. Some you recognize and some you don't, right? But there's other reasons they don't recognize him. What would happen is if Joseph was so ingrained in the culture, he would have shaved his head. And if you've seen these pictures like on the tombs of Egyptians, what do the men in Egypt wear? Makeup. Tastefully done, but they wear makeup. Okay? So Joseph has all this makeup on, and he was unrecognizable. So they didn't recognize him. And then he remembered his dreams. And here's what he does. He says, you're spies. He's kind of messing with them a little bit. And the reason he's doing that, he's not being mean, but the last time he saw his brothers, they sold him into slavery. And he loves his brothers, but he wants to see if they're trustworthy. Because if they're not trustworthy, there still could be problems. So he's going to see if they're trustworthy. So as we continue the story, in order to bless others, first of all, be immersed in your culture. Joseph is totally immersed in the culture, so immersed that he's unrecognizable. And if we're going to minister to others, it's so important we become a part of the culture that we're ministering to. And that's one of the reasons I like to wear jeans when I preach, and I like to wear shirts like this, because this is the culture. If I was ministering down in Florida to a bunch of retirees, I wouldn't dress this way. I'd probably wear a suit, or at least a jacket, and dress nicer. But we have to minister to the culture. Not only that, I like to dress this way, but still, it's part of the culture, right? And that's what we need to do. And if I was going to make inroads into, let's say, the Honda plant, one of the pond plants or one of the subsidiary industries here in the area, if I want to become a part of the culture, here's what I would do. I would go there and I would apply for a job and I would get a job there in the culture. I wouldn't come in as a visiting pastor to Honda. That wouldn't work. I would go into the culture. If I wanted to make a difference in one of the local schools, be it West Liberty or Indian Lake or Riverside or Bell Fountain, if I wanted to make the best difference I could, here's what I would do. I would go into that culture. And I would get a job as a teacher or a bus driver or a custodian or an assistant principal. You know, I've done that before. I would do that, and I would make a difference in that culture. If I wanted to really be immersed in it, I'd have to do that. Or Mary Boutin Hospital, I would go there, and I don't have the smarts to become a doctor. I don't think I'd like to be a nurse, but there's other jobs there. I don't know if they have jobs you push around wheelchairs with people. You do that? Man, I could do that, or work in the cafeteria. That's what I would do. I would be immersed in the culture. But I can't do any of that because I'm the pastor here. But think about where you're immersed in your job. Naturally, you're already part of the culture. And just think of what you can do and what you can say and the relationships you can have that I can never have. And they say a pastor loses 70% of his effectiveness when he becomes a pastor. And I think that's true in many ways of the one-on-one, because people say, oh, you say that, you're a religious professional, that's what you're supposed to say. But in some ways, you lose some of your credibility. And you guys, when you talk about people at your work and friends and family, in many ways, you're more credible than I'll ever be with them. Okay? Now, I need to be as credible as I can and do the right things. But I am not immersed in culture like you're immersed in different cultures. It's just the truth. So be immersed in your culture. The good news is you're already there. Well, let's continue the story. So here's what Joseph does. He puts them in prison for 3 days. He says, you're spies, and he imprisons them. And maybe, just maybe, he's given them a taste of their own medicine. Because what did they do? They sold him to slavery in Egypt. He didn't do a thing. And now his brothers haven't done anything, and he just puts them in prison for 3 days. And then he has talked to him, and he gets this idea. He says, if you're really true, here's what I want you to do. I want you to all go back to your homeland. He said, I'll sell you this grain. That's okay, I'll take your silver. They brought silver. I'll sell you this grain. But if you're telling me the truth, I want you to bring back that youngest brother of yours named Benjamin. Because that was Joseph's real biological brother, not his half-brother. They were both children of Rachel's. Okay? So I want you to bring back that youngest brother, Benjamin. I'm going to keep one of your other brothers here to make sure you do that, and that's what I want you to do. So they go back, one of the other brothers stays behind, and they go back to the dad. And they tell the dad about what's going on. And they have the food for him for a while that they bought. And they said to one another, surely we're being punished because of our brother. We have to see how distressed we've been when he pleaded with us for his life, but we would not listen. That's why this distress has come upon us. They begin thinking back what happened to Joseph, and they're going, well, basically God's punishing us. Reuben replied, didn't I tell you not to sin against the boy? And Reuben was one of them, the one brother that said, don't kill him. And Reuben left for a few minutes. When he was gone, they sold him off to the slave traders. But you wouldn't listen. And Reuben says, I told you so. I told you so, guys. Now we must give an accounting for his blood. And they realized that they didn't realize Joseph could understand them since he was using an interpreter. He turned away from them and began to weep. But then he turned back and spoke to them again. He had Simeon taken from them and bound before their eyes. So Simeon is going to take them. He's going to keep them as collateral and send the other brothers home. And when Joseph weeps, why does he weep? Well, I think that brings up our second point is, be humble. Be humble. He loves his brothers, and he's taken back. Even what they did to him, he begins to weep because he has such an empathy for his brothers. Now, he's going to make sure they're trustworthy. And forgiveness doesn't mean you trust everybody. It means you're forgiven. But some people you have to earn back their trust, and that's okay. So he's going to make sure they do that, but he cries because he cares so much about them. So then Joseph does this to them. He fills their bags with the grain, and he puts their silver back in it, and they don't know it. And they get home to their dad. They open up the grain so they're starved, and now they see the silver in their bags, and they're going, what in the world happened? We can't go back there. They're going to think we took the silver. So we pick up the story there. When they came to their father Jacob, the land of Canaan, they all get home. They told him what had happened. They said, the man who is Lord over the place spoke harshly to us. You believe it? They sold Joseph, 20 years ago, they sold him into slavery. Now they're complaining because this guy spoke harshly to them. And treated us as though we were spying on the land. Falsely accused us. Well, guys, how does it feel, right? But we said to him, we are honest men. We are not spies. We were 12 brothers, sons of one father. One is no more. And the youngest is now with our father in Canaan. And that was Joseph, who they believe is gone. Then the man who was Lord over us said to us, this is how I'll know whether you're honest men. And he says, I'm going to send you back. I'm going to keep one of your brothers as collateral. You need to come back and get him. Okay? Then their father Jacob said to them, you have deprived me of my children. Joseph is no more. And Simeon, who was kept as collateral back in Egypt, is no more. And now you want to take Benjamin. Everything is against me. You've taken my favorite, Joseph. You've taken another son, Simeon. He's back in prison. And now you want to take Benjamin, my favorite, back? It's not going to happen. Then Reuben said to his father, you may put both of my sons to death if I do not bring him back to you. Talking about Benjamin now, and trust them. But he says, no, I'm not going to do it. Not going to happen. So some time passes, and what happens to the food? They use it all up. And now they have no choice. And we're told, now the famine was still severe in the land, so they had eaten all the grain they had brought from Egypt. Now, why is there so much grain in Egypt? Because of who? Joseph. And Joseph, think about it, he was in Potiphar's house. He rose to the second highest rank under Potiphar. Then he went to prison. And again, if you're going to go to prison, you need to do a good job. He rises to the second highest prisoner. The highest prisoner rank right below the jailer. And now Pharaoh employs him, and now he's second in command to everybody behind Pharaoh. And what Joseph is doing is, he has the gift of administration. And point number 3 is to use your spiritual gifts and talents if you're really going to bless other people the way they need to be blessed. That's what we need to do. And all of us have spiritual gifts and talents. We can give you a spiritual gift survey. Everybody, once they give their life to Christ, is given a spiritual gift that you have the rest of your life. They usually don't change too much. And there's lots of spiritual gifts, but one of them is administration. And Joseph is phenomenal. And because he can use his gift, that's what's going on. Hospitality is one spiritual gift. I go to some people's homes, and there's just something amazing. I feel comfortable right away. Do you ever go to a home like that? That person has the gift of hospitality. Okay? Some people have the gift of mercy. They just supernaturally care for somebody. It just breaks their heart when anything happens. That's a spiritual gift. Some people have the spiritual gift of teaching, and Joseph has the spiritual gift of administration. And my wife, Mary, who's sitting in the back row there, has the same gift. I think she's a little bit better than Joseph was. Maybe not. I think so. But she has this supernatural gift of administration and is able to organize systems and put them in place quickly. And I'm not just saying that to brag on Mary, but that's one of the reasons that Quest has done so well. God has put her in this position to do that. So whatever spiritual gift you have, use it. Or if it's a talent, if you're a good cook or baker, use that to bless other people. Okay? If you're good at encouraging, that's a spiritual gift. Encourage people. If you're good at administration, do that. But I think we bless people, others, when we use our spiritual gifts and talents. Well, they're going to go now. They head back to Egypt, and now they have Benjamin with them. Judah said, when Dad didn't want him to go, he said, you won't see my face again unless my brother's with me. I'm going to bring Joseph back. I'm going to bring everybody back, Dad. And Dad says, well, you have to go. We're out of food. So that's what happens. And then here's what Jacob does. He said, if you're going to go back, take all the silver back and then some extra silver. Just told them you don't know what happened, but they're going to know it's gone. And then he gives them all these gifts. He gives them balm and honey and spices and myrrh and pistachio nuts and almonds, things that might not have been in Egypt at the time. And they put them in sacks, and now they're going to go back, and they do. So the men took the gifts and double the amount of silver, and Benjamin also. They hurried down to Egypt to present themselves to Joseph. When Joseph saw Benjamin with them, he said to the steward of his house, take these men to my house, slaughter an animal, and prepare dinner. They're going to eat with me at noon. Well, surely enough, a little while later, Joseph comes back, and then they have a meal. And here's what happens. The steward took the men into Joseph's house, gave them water to wash their feet, and provided food for their donkeys. They prepared gifts for Joseph's arrival at noon. I'm at 43:24 now, because they were heard they were there to eat. When Joseph came home, they presented him with the gifts they had brought to the house, and they bowed down before him to the ground. They bowed like you would before God. They put their faces in the dirt, basically. Okay, they bowed before it again. And he says, Joseph says through an interpreter, "How's your aged father you told me about? Is he still living?" They replied, "Yeah, our father's still alive." And they bowed low to pay him honor again. As he looked about and he saw his brother Benjamin, his own mother's son, he asked, "Is this your youngest brother? It's been 20 years. Is this your youngest brother, the one you told me about?" And he said, "God be gracious to you, my son." So he gives a blessing to Joseph in Egyptian. He blesses, or Joseph gives the blessing to his younger brother Benjamin. Joseph hurried out and looked for a place to weep. He went to his private room and he wept there. And he sees his younger brother and he's overcome with emotions because he has such empathy for him, and he still loves his brothers, and he loves Benjamin. And after he had washed his face, he came out controlling himself and said, "Serve the food." Now, why does Joseph wash his face? What happens? His makeup runs. Yeah, that's probably what happened. You know what happened? You know, mascara, you get the cheap mascara, you know what happens, right? Well, they didn't have that stay-on stuff that we have now, and probably his makeup runs. That's what those scholars think would happen. His makeup runs, so he has to get his makeup all ready, and he washes his face, and he comes back out. And he serves the brothers. Now, they can't eat the same table. They were foreigners. They weren't considered worthy to eat at the table with Joseph and all of the Egyptian cronies with him. But they eat at different tables. And what Joseph has done, he has had his servants see his brothers in order from the oldest to the youngest. And the brothers are being seated one at a time, and after 3 or 4 are seated, going, "What's going on?" He knows who's the youngest and who's the oldest. And it's just they're astonished. They know something's going on, but they don't have to figure it out. Well, then Joseph does another thing. And he says, "Okay, send them back with grain." And then he gave these instructions: "Fill them in sacks with as much food as they could carry, and put in each man's silver in the mouth of the sack." He says, "Put the silver back in again." Okay? "Then put my cup, the silver cup, in the mouth of the youngest one's sack." Who is that? Benjamin. "Put my own personal cup in Benjamin's sack." So then he sends them out on their way. He lets them go. He sends his brothers back, lets his brothers get a head start, and then he sends his men after them. And they go back and they catch up with his brothers. He says, "Go after those men at once, and when you catch them, say, 'Why have you repaid good with evil? Isn't this the cup my master drinks from and he uses?'" And they caught up with him, and that's what happens. They say, "What are you doing? Our master tried to help you to steal the silver, and now you've even taken his personal cup," right? So now the brothers are going, "What in the world is going on?" So we're told this: each of them lowered the sack to the ground and opened it. Then the steward proceeded to search. I'm in 44:11 now. And the cup was found in Benjamin's sack. At this, they tore their clothes. Then they all loaded their donkeys and returned to the cities. They tear your clothes as a sign of mourning, because they know Benjamin's a goner. Because they think Benjamin will be accused of stealing the king's special cup, or stealing the second command of Joseph's special cup. So they think, "Oh no, now Benjamin's done in, and we promised Dad we'd take care of him." Looks really bad. And then Judah goes to Joseph. Now, Judah was the one who had the great idea of kidnapping Joseph. He wanted to kill him. He said, "Oh, let's just sell him to the slave traders and get some money for him." That was Judah's idea. Judah, not Judas. It sounds like Judah. Judah's idea. So now Judah speaks up to Joseph, who he still doesn't recognize. Then Judah went up and said, "Please, my lord, let your servant speak a word to you. Don't be angry." And he goes into this long pleading speech, which up until that time is the longest speech in the Bible. Basically, he's my father's favorite. He's his oldest. He loves him. He's the youngest. "Please," he said, "take me as a punishment. Take me, but let Benjamin go." And Judah's made a long way, hasn't he? He's gone from selling his brother away to saying, "Take me, let Benjamin go. Use me, let my little brother go. And now please let your servant remain here as my lord's slave in place of the boy, and let the boy return with his brothers. How can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me, Judah says. Don't let me see the misery that will come upon my father. When Joseph sees this now, he realizes his brothers have changed. He realizes Judah has changed. And here's what happens next. Then Joseph could no longer control himself, and he cried out. He says, everyone leave. And then we're told he weeps so loudly that the Egyptians heard him. And Pharaoh's household heard about it. And then Joseph said to his brothers, now he speaks their language, I am Joseph. Is my father still living? But his brothers were unable to answer him because they were terrified at his presence. That's Joseph. We're goners. Right? We're goners. Then Joseph said to his brothers, come close to me. You know, they don't have a choice, right? They do that. They probably think they're going to get killed. When they had done so, he said, I am your brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt. Like, not your other brother Joseph, the one you sold into Egypt, right? And now, do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. For 2 years now there's been famine in the land, and for the next 5 years there will be no plowing or reaping. But God sent me ahead of you to preserve you for a remnant on earth, and to save your lives by a great deliverance. Through you, all people of the world will be blessed, and that blessing is going to continue. So it was not you who sent me, but God. He made me father to Pharaoh, lord of his entire nation, and ruler of all Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and say to him, this is what your son Joseph says, God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come to me, don't delay. You shall live in the region of Goshen and near me, okay? And your children, your grandchildren, your flocks and herds, all I have is yours. I will provide basically everything you need. And then he can't control himself, so he goes a long speech. I imagine all the brothers just sitting there going, wow, unbelievable. They can't believe what's happened. Then Joseph, he threw his arms around his brother Benjamin, and he weeps. Okay, I think this is the 4th time that he's wept. Joseph's an official crybaby right now. He's crying. You can just see how God has touched his heart. Can't you? He cries again. And he wept, and Benjamin embraced him. And Benjamin was crying too. And he kissed all his brothers and wept over them. Afterwards, his brothers talked with them. He kissed all his brothers, and he wept for them. Wow. I wonder what I would have done if I was Joseph. When they first bowed down, I would have said right away, I'm Joseph. I told you so. I told you were going to bow down. Remember? Remember those dreams that you said, well, here it is. I told you so. Not once does Joseph say, I told you so. I love to tell I told you so. I used to do it with my kids. They hated it. It wasn't good parenting, but I did it anyway. So the news reaches back to Pharaoh. He says, you know what? Go back. Take some carts for transportation. Go get your dad and bring them back. And everything we have is yours. And so now the people come back. And point number 4 is this. If you want to be, in order to bless others, we need to forgive others. If you can't forgive others, not just the person you're blessed, but if you can't forgive others, it's really hard to bless them. And the only way that Joseph is able to bless all his brothers, and through him all the people of the world, is because he forgives them. Never once does he say, I told you so, as we said, he forgives them. And that's how we bless. That's how others are blessed. And along with that, there's an asterisk by that point, because points 4 and 5 go together. In order to bless others, we need to be spiritually mature. Remember when Joseph told his brothers to dream, and how stupid that was, and how he just shot off his mouth, and how immature he was? 20 years have passed, and now is Joseph spiritually mature? Is he doing some things that show how much maturity he has? Unbelievably. Unbelievably so. And now he's a spiritually mature person. And if you really want to bless others, you need to grow in your faith. You need to become more and more spiritually mature. We never arrive. We're always working on it. God's always revealing us the next thing we need to do within ourselves to change. But we need to be spiritually mature to bless others in the way that God wants us to. We can bless others, but if we really want to bless them, we need to be spiritually mature people. Well, let's wrap this up. Joseph was there with all his brothers. Everything's going great. Few years later now, Jacob, Joseph's dad, dies. The father of the 12 tribes and all the brothers. Well, their father dies. When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the things we did to him?" So they sent word to Joseph saying, "Your father," talking about Jacob, "your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father." When their message came to Joseph, what did Joseph do? What do you think he does? Joseph wept. He cries again. And I think he cries for two reasons. One, he's lost his dad. He's crying over that. But I think he cries for his brothers because he doesn't realize that they have not really fully accepted the scope of his forgiveness. And they still think he's going to get them. He's like, "No, guys, I'm not. I love you. You're my brothers. You are forgiven." So I think he cries for those two reasons. And his brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. "We are your slaves," they said. They bow down again. But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God?" Am I in the place of God? God's going to judge, not me, guys. I love you. You're my brothers. And our sixth point is this: be about God's business. Joseph wasn't in the judging business. He says, "Am I doing God's work?" No. I'm serving God. I am about God's business. And because Joseph has been about God's business ever since the day he arrived in Egypt, he's going to make those changes in Egypt, and he's going to be able to preserve the 12 tribes of Israel. And through them, all peoples of the world will be blessed. And then he says these famous words. He says, "You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives." You intended to harm me, but God intended it to do good. It's one of my most famous verses in Scripture. There it is, Genesis 50:20. And I think what Joseph is saying is things are going to happen in all our lives. And God, I don't believe, orchestrates this would happen, but I think God sees the whole entire picture of all the world. He owns times, and he can see the past, the present, the future, and he knows what's going to happen. He's going to use that as a blessing for his own good, and that's what he does. There's another verse in the New Testament, and it's the Apostle Paul, greatest missionary who ever lived. Missionary writes to the church at Rome, and he says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who are called according to his purpose." You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good. You know, we're all going to face tragedy in our life. I hate to say it. If you're a Christian, it doesn't mean you're immune from the troubles of the world. But what we do with that tragedy and what we do in spite of it and how we can use that even in ways that would please and glorify God, that's totally up to us. And out there, many of you have seen the Victoria Global Missions and what Faith has chosen to do. Her daughter was killed, but she's brought goodness out of that. And I don't believe that God ever intended for her daughter, Victoria, to die. I don't believe that God does that, but wants people to die. They're 21 and things like that, and those things to happen. But I think that God can bring good out of any tragedy that we face. Any tragedy. So as we close today, here's what I want you to think about. And here's the statement, the final statement of your sermon notes. I will become a better blessing to others by. And it's either I will become a blessing. I know some of you are huge blessings to others. And I wanted to make them just say, hey, thank you. Keep doing that. But just think about other ways that we can become a better blessing to others. What is that? Maybe you need to forgive somebody. Maybe you need to do something in your culture that you're not doing right now. Maybe you need to witness to a family member or a friend or invite somebody to church. Maybe send somebody a card. Make them something to eat. Break leaves for a neighbor. I don't know what that would be. But just think about, I will become a better blessing to others by. Take some time in the next week or two, or even today, even as we close. You can fill that in. But as we close, let me say this. Often the best blessings that we can give are the ones that cost us the most. And you think about the ministry of Jesus Christ, thousands of years later, Jesus did amazing things. He was an amazing preacher. He was an amazing teacher. He performed miracles. He brought back people from the dead. But he's remembered, and what makes a difference in all of our lives is because he died on the cross for our sins. Often the best blessings are the one we can give are the ones that cost us the most. He paid the price of his life so we could live eternally with God. And God saw to it. God gave his son up to do that as well. So as we close today, I just want you to think and pray. Maybe thank Jesus for that sacrifice he made on the cross. And just say, what is it, God, you want me to be doing so that I can bless others? What is it you want me to do? And in our closing song, I want you to just pray that and see what that is. And then the hard part is this. You need to do it. You need to do it. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for this amazing story of Joseph. It's amazing, Father, what you did through him and how he changed and how we continue to receive blessings because of what he did. Father, just touch our hearts. Allow us as your people to bless others in any way that you see fit. Allow us to just reach out to them and do things that we normally wouldn't do, things that might cost us. And we pray this in your name. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen. We've got a couple people.